Imagine living in a world where nomadic tribes shaped the destiny of entire nations. Among them, the Midianites stood out as persistent enemies of the Israelites. But who were the Midianites, and why was their relationship with their relatives, the Israelites, so fraught with conflict? Despite being descendants of Abraham, the Midianites became relentless adversaries. Why did these relatives become enemies? And how did this affect the trajectory of the people of Israel? In this video, we will delve into the history of the Midianites, discover their origins, understand their nomadic way of life, and reveal the reasons that made them so threatening to Israel. Prepare yourself for a journey through ancient history, filled with revelations and insights about one of the most intriguing peoples in the Bible. The origin of the Midianites finds its roots in Midian, son of Abraham with Keturah. After Sarah's death, Abraham took Keturah as a wife, and she bore him several sons, including Midian, Genesis 25:1-2. This relationship is significant because it shows that the Midianites, although not part of the covenant lineage established with Isaac, were still descendants of Abraham. Some scholars speculate that the union between Abraham and Keturah may have occurred before Sarah's death, although Genesis places it afterward. The identification of Keturah as Abraham's concubine, 1 Chronicles 1:32, adds a layer of complexity to the chronology and family dynamics of Abraham. To avoid disputes over the inheritance promised to Isaac, Abraham sent the sons of his concubines away to the east with gifts, Genesis 25:6. This act ensured that Isaac remained the sole heir of the divine covenant, while the other sons, including Midian, settled in other regions. This explains how the Midianites came to inhabit areas east of Canaan, on the borders of the Transjordan Desert. The history of the Midianites and their origin reveals the complexity of family relationships in antiquity and the importance of following the divine plan. By sending his other sons away, Abraham demonstrated obedience to God by keeping Isaac as the heir of the promise. This act teaches us about the need to trust in God's plans, even when they seem difficult or painful. The Midianites were a nomadic people known for their ability to survive and thrive in arid and inhospitable areas. They lived as desert nomads, frequently moving in search of pasture and water for their flocks. The Bible describes the Midianites as being organized into tribal units, with 5 princes leading the different clans, Numbers 31:8. Interestingly, the Bible not only recounts the life of the Midianites, but also highlights their commercial interactions and strategic alliances. For example, the Midianites were skilled traders and often conducted business with other peoples. It was in one of these transactions that they appeared in the story of Joseph. When Joseph's brothers decided to get rid of him, they sold him to Midianite merchants who then took him to Egypt, Genesis 37:28. This story underscores not only the cruelty of Joseph's brothers, but also the role of the Midianites as commercial intermediaries in the region. Furthermore, the Midianites had a rich culture and a complex social structure. Their alliance with other nomadic groups, such as the Ishmaelites, created a powerful and influential tribal confederation. This is evidenced by the frequent interchange of terms between Midianites and Ishmaelites in the scriptures, suggesting a cultural and ethnic fusion between these peoples. The Midianites were not only shepherds and traders, but also formidable warriors. During the period of the Judges, they oppressed Israel for 7 years, joining forces with the Amalekites and other eastern peoples to devastate the land of Israel, Judges 6:3-5. Their use of camels in their invasions gave them a significant advantage in mobility and reach, making them a feared force in the region. However, the history of the Midianites is also a story of twists and divine interventions. When the Israelites cried out to the Lord for help, God raised up Gideon to lead a revolt against the Midianites. With only 300 men, Gideon achieved a miraculous victory over the vast Midianite army, a story that resonates as a powerful example of faith and divine obedience, Judges 7:7. The life of the Midianites, full of movement and dynamism, offers us valuable lessons about resilience, adaptation, and the complex relationships between different peoples in antiquity. By exploring their history, we better understand the cultural and geopolitical landscape of the Bible, as well as the ways in which God intervened in the history of his people to fulfill his purposes. The history of the Midianites is like a river with complex branches, where each tributary feeds and is fed by other streams, creating a living network of influences and interactions. This connection between Midianites, Ishmaelites, and Medanites exemplifies an intricate web of tribal relationships that extended beyond geopolitics, delving deeply into the family and cultural aspects of antiquity. In biblical times, nomadic tribes like the Midianites lived in constant movement across vast desert regions, forming commercial relationships and strategic alliances with other tribes and nations. These interactions were essential not only for survival, but also for the flourishing of these tribes, which depended on trade and military alliances to ensure the security and sustenance of their communities. In the biblical narrative, the Midianites frequently appear intertwined with other peoples descended from Abraham. A classic example is found in Genesis 37:28, where Joseph is sold by his brothers to Midianite merchants, who are also referred to as Ishmaelites in other passages. This interchange of names suggests a significant fusion between these groups, indicating deep and complex ties among the descendants of Abraham's concubines. Marriages among these groups further strengthened these ties. Just as two rivers can join to form a stronger current, matrimonial alliances among Abraham's descendants created a network of interdependencies. These matrimonial practices not only consolidated power and influence, but also promoted cohesion among the nomadic tribes that might otherwise have remained isolated. The Midianites were known for their skill in trade and their military capabilities. They were famous for their caravans transporting spices, perfumes, and other valuable goods along desert trade routes. These caravans were vital for trade between Egypt and Mesopotamia, making the Midianites an essential component of the economy of that era. Religiously, the Midianites practiced a blend of ancestral traditions and influences from the peoples they interacted with. They worshipped a variety of gods, and some of their religious practices influenced the Israelites at different times in the biblical narrative. The episode of the golden calf in Exodus 32, for example, may reflect the influence of idolatrous practices of neighboring peoples, including the Midianites. The impact of these interrelations is profoundly significant in the biblical narrative. When the Midianites appear as merchants, warriors, or allies, they bring with them a diverse cultural heritage enriched by their multiple origins. It is this complexity that makes the Midianites such an unpredictable and fascinating force in biblical accounts. The Midianites were organized into tribal units, a social system that allowed them to survive and thrive in the harsh conditions of the desert. The Bible mentions 5 princes of Midian, suggesting that Midianite society was divided into 5 main clans, Numbers 31:8. This tribal structure not only facilitated governance and decision-making, but also helped maintain the cohesion and cultural identity of the people. Linguistically, the Midianites spoke a Semitic language that was very close to Hebrew. This is not surprising, given that both peoples shared a common heritage as descendants of Abraham. The linguistic similarity may have facilitated communication and even some commercial and diplomatic interactions between the Midianites and the Israelites. The customs of the Midianites were quite similar to those of the Hebrews, reflecting their common origins. They shared cultural practices such as shepherding, nomadic life, and various social traditions. However, a crucial difference lay in religious practice. While the Hebrews worshipped Yahweh, the Midianites followed a distinct religious path that included the worship of other gods and practices that often led to conflict with Israel. A notable example of this religious divergence is found in the story of Balaam, a prophet hired by the Moabites and Midianites to curse Israel. Despite his failed attempt to curse God's people, Balaam managed to induce the Israelites to sin through idolatry and sexual immorality, resulting in serious consequences for both peoples. Numbers 22-25. One of the most inspiring and significant moments involving the Midianites is the story of Moses. When Moses fled Egypt, He found refuge among the Midianites and ended up marrying Zipporah, the daughter of Jethro, priest of Midian, Exodus 2:21. This marriage not only united Moses with a new family but also with a culture and faith that, despite being diverse, still retained traces of the knowledge of the God of Abraham. However, the biblical narrative provides a rich and detailed view of this people, highlighting their interactions with Israel and their role in fulfilling divine purposes. The biblical accounts of the Midianites are not just ancient stories but timeless lessons that continue to inspire and challenge us. They show us the importance of faithfulness to God, courage in times of adversity, and wisdom in our alliances and relationships. As we reflect on the history of the Midianites and their interactions with the people of Israel, we are called to consider our own walk of faith. Just as Moses, Gideon, and Jael each had a role to play in the divine plan, so do each of us. God calls us to be faithful, courageous, and wise, regardless of the circumstances we face. If you enjoyed this study and wish to deepen your biblical knowledge, subscribe to our channel. Join us on the journey of exploring the wonders of Scripture and applying its eternal truths in our daily lives. May God richly bless you in your quest for deeper faith and a fuller life.